please remember to leave a like, a comment, share the video about, and if you haven't already, subscribe. Thank you. Well, isn't this just fantastic? Captain's Log, Supplemental. We have to have a separate wing just to house the vindictive tools that harm children. I personally was all in favour of a Thunderdome, but apparently that counts as a form of fun, which is haram. Welcome everyone to the Halls of Injustice. Today we welcome Inmates number 160 to the ISO cubes. Inmates number 160 has committed a truly heinous crime, so I'm going to insert a trigger warning now. What we're going to talk about involves a child. If at any point you are uncomfortable with the nature of the subject and or the crime committed by Inmates number 160, just smash the like and depart, basically. Inmates number 160's name is Leila Borrington. Inmates number 160 is going to be with us for quite some time. Owing to a lack of sources concerning her origins, we are going to talk about who she is, but it will be quite short, before we head into the crime, the trial, the sentencing, but also the law at some point in the middle, as there are a number of charges we need to look at. So who is Leila Borrington, aka Inmates number 160? Inmates number 160 is a 23-year-old from Jacksdale, Nottingham. She was married, and by extension became a stepmother to a 3-year-old called Harvey Borrington. Harvey Borrington would spend his weekends with his father. The relationship with Leila Borrington and Harvey's dad, Jonathan, was quite quick. In fact, they only got engaged 2 months before the crime itself was committed. Leila and Jonathan had actually had a child, a daughter, early on in their relationship, aged 3 as well. Within all the articles I have linked down below, they all reference that they were engaged at the time of the crime, and that considering the future for Leila Borrington, they weren't married at the time of her sentence. This minor disparity is a little frustrating to work with, especially when you have additionally that they still aimed to get married when she was sentenced. There's an issue there. When we get to it, you'll understand why I find this so peculiar. So with this very minimal information available, we need to now go to the crimes of Leila Borrington. There are a number of charges, so the law aspect of this will more than likely be covered before we get to the trial and sentence, so you have all the context. Inmates number 160, Leila Borrington, was not a good stepmother. Quick to collar, violent, she possessed within her a hatred and anger. It is almost cliché that a step-parent would not be overly fond of their non-child, treating them differently from the child they produced. In this instance, Harvey was mistreated significantly by Leila Borrington. The crimes committed against Harvey Borrington happened on the 7th of August 2021. Leila Borrington had called 999, claiming that Harvey had fallen off his chair. When the paramedics arrived, she informed them that one of the reasons she delayed was because she was filming him to show paramedics him moaning on the floor. Harvey Borrington sadly passed away because of these injuries from falling out of a chair. Medical experts concluded that Harvey's injuries included a fractured skull and a fatal bleed on the brain, which had been caused by repeated blows instead of a one-off fall. However, this isn't where it ends. You see, they also found multiple old injuries, including broken arms. One of the reasons Leila Borrington was able to take advantage of Harvey was because he was autistic and non-verbal, meaning he would never be able to tell someone if he was being hurt by another person. In the video, she can clearly be heard saying Harvey, Harv. She even sent the video to Jonathan Borrington with a caption, "Why does this happen to me?" In that same video, she lifts up his left arm and simply drops it to the floor loosely. Something the paramedics did highlight was the fact that Harvey Borrington was laying in such a peculiar way because Leila had moved him to make it look more staged. Yeah, more like that's how you fall out of a chair, you know, like those chalk outlines on a floor. Leila Borrington was charged with several charges. Just to be clear here, you have assaulting and causing grievous bodily harm, you have manslaughter, you have actual bodily harm, you have the intentionally causing death of a child, and murder. Since we haven't covered a few of those here, let's address the law. The first charge: causing or allowing death or serious physical harm. Section 5 of the Domestic Violence, Crime and Victims Act of 2004. It created the offence of causing or allowing the death of a child or vulnerable adult. The section was amended in 2012 to the Domestic Violence, Crime and Victims Amendment Act of 2012. It came into force on the 2nd of July 2012. The offence is made out where evidence exists to establish the following elements. 1. A child has died or suffered serious physical harm. 2. The death or serious physical harm was the result of an unlawful act, course of conduct or omission of a person who was a member of the same household as the victim and who had frequent contact with the victim. 3. There existed at the time of death a significant risk of physical harm being caused to the victim by the unlawful act of any member of that household, and either the person who committed the act was the person whose unlawful act caused the victim's death or serious physical harm, or the person who caused the harm was or ought to have been aware of that risk and failed to take such steps as he or she could reasonably have been expected to protect the victim from that risk of serious physical harm, and the death or serious physical harm occurred in circumstances of the kind that the person who committed this foresaw or ought to have foreseen. I have paraphrased D there, as you will have noticed on the screen. It paints a better light. In this instance, where serious physical harm occurs, the maximum sentence is 10 years. However, when it involves a death occurring, the maximum sentence is 14 years. Do try to remember this, because I also mentioned murder. The minimum sentence is life in that instance, but there are other charges as well. The charge of assault also has additional charges of common assault, actual bodily harm, and grievous bodily harm, ABH, GBH. In the case of grievous bodily harm, it means that the assault has caused serious physical harm. It does not have to be permanent or dangerous. For example, a broken bone would amount to GBH. In some cases, that could lead to a permanent disability. GBH can also though include psychiatric injury or someone passing on an infection, for example through sexual activity. When it comes to GBH, the maximum sentence is 5 years in custody. If the assault was committed with the intent to cause GBH or wounding, the maximum sentence is life. This is all quite important so far. Am I painting a good picture yet? Now, we have manslaughter to add, and there's a reason why. It's because when it came to this trial, which we'll get to soon, they had to prove beyond reasonable doubt that she committed a murder. Manslaughter is a much easier charge to nail someone with. When an unlawful killing is done without the intention to kill or to cause GBH, the suspect is to be charged with manslaughter, not murder. Apart from the absence of the requisite intent, all other elements of the offence are the same as for murder, with the sentence ranging depending on the type. For gross negligence, 12 years, loss of control, 14 years, unlawful act, 18 years, diminished responsibility, 24 years, one shy, essentially, of a life imprisonment sentence. With all this in mind now, I'd like to now take you to the trial. You now know, spoiler I guess, murder is off the table. Manslaughter takes its place. The trial for this, compared to other trials we've covered, was actually somewhat long. It commenced on the 16th of November 2022 and only ended in the middle of March 2023. Jonas Hankin Casey opened for the prosecution and said that Leila Borrington had been at home caring alone for the youngster whilst Harvey's father had been at work, when it was likely the fatal injury was inflicted at the couple's home. Jurors were then shown the footage filmed by Leila Borrington just moments after Harvey's collapse, which include all the quotes of Harv lifting the arm like a wrestler to see if he's asleep, and then the positioning being quite strange. Mr. Hankin believed that the defendant's behaviour was very unusual in the circumstances, being quoted as saying her instinct seeing a child unconscious and in distress having sustained serious injury following a fall is to reach for her phone and make a video rather than call an ambulance, adding, the tone of her voice when calling Harvey's name in her attempts to rouse him, if that's an accurate description, we say it is not, suggest an absence of compassion. The lifting and dropping of his arm in that way similarly appears to show indifference to the obvious severity of his condition. It took 3 minutes after this incident for her to ring 999. A neighbour confirmed that they had heard a thud from the Borringtons' home before the stepmother started hammering on her door. While waiting for the ambulance, She then sent another message to Jonathan Borrington, saying, "Don't leave the kids with me again." Jonas Henkin then told the jurors, "You don't need me to point out an inconsistent history about an event like this is a red flag." The post-mortem examination did confirm that he had suffered severe trauma to the head, which had caused the damage to the brain itself, with him concluding that all medical experts agree Harvey was unlawfully killed. For the sake of transparency with this video, there is no actual indication in any article I found stating what her defense said were the reasons for why this had happened, or trying to refute any of the claims when all medical evidence leaned in favor of Leila Borrington causing these injuries. The reason though that murder had to be dropped was because they could not confirm she had actually done it, in the sense of knowingly ending a life. Manslaughter was the safest way of getting a conviction. And when it came to the charges of grievous bodily harm, Leila Borrington's only response to that was, "I was trying to stop him falling down the stairs." All of which sounds like somebody we've covered before. So with this, the sentence. Leila Borrington, inmate 160, found guilty of manslaughter and GBH, cleared of murder and a couple other assault charges, was sentenced to 15 years in prison. She was given other years added on top, but they were all concurrent, as opposed to consecutive. She is mandated to serve 10 years minimum before she is eligible for parole, a sentence I do not agree with.